kind of glorious, beautiful play tonight. We are lucky enough to have Knud Adams here, our lovely director. Before we get everyone else on, tell us a little bit about the process of this play and how it came to fruition and how did you work? Just give us a little bit of that backstory.
Sure. I'll be joined shortly by the rest of the team, no worries. Very briefly, Sanaz wrote the play, and it's had one of those sort of long COVID-disrupted journeys to the stage where it was going to be in another space, originally at the Roundabout Underground space, if you've ever checked that out, in the fall of 2020, of course, delayed by the quarantine, and in figuring out this new textures of a season, putting all the pieces back together, we had the opportunity to see if it would fit in another space, and we were very fortunate that Atlantic had an opening here. So after a little delay, we're now being co-produced by the Roundabout and the Atlantic, the first time I think they've ever collaborated, which is really special. And we got to, it's a little heartbreaking to have your plans disrupted, especially in the moment when everything feels so tenuous. But one of the facts of that is that it afforded us just a little bit more time to strategize and find the perfect team and think very deeply about how we wanted to attack it. And that was, thinking about this production is one of the things that personally for me kept, was sort of the light at the end of my quarantine tunnel. And here we are, and just rearing to go, and then we start rehearsals at the peak of Omicron. We waited so long, and then it came back just in time. But through the safety measures implemented by the Atlantic and their COVID safety team, so far we've been mostly unaffected by that, and the cast is all healthy, and we're going strong. Here we are. We open in a week. We're still working. The actors got new pages as of today. Chipping away, working really hard, but they're doing great. And here we are. Thank you for being here.
Can we just give a round of applause for our amazing playwright? Congratulations. Beautiful work. You're working them hard today, rehearsing them, giving them new pages. What are, how's the process? But you know what? I hear them. Hello. Can we just give one more round of applause to you? I think the first question I wanted to ask everyone, besides just first saying amazing work, everybody, just like beautifully done. I really appreciate all of you guys putting an Iranian story out there in this way. My first question is, what is your relationship with English? Like your personal relationship with it?
Yeah.
And if anyone needs this, this is right here.
I might need it. I can't project. You guys will let me know. Boo if you're a tomato. I was born up here. I'm Iranian American. We were bilingual in the house, and I would say pretty heavily Farsi. And I think like many Iranians, my family has a deep connection to Farsi. It's to us the language of Hafez and Rumi and all the beautiful.
Mic, please.
Mic, please.
Hold on. The director.
Test.
Thank you. So we were pretty split down the middle between Farsi and English, and I have always been hugely insecure about the way I speak English. I thought I had an accent until 5 years ago. And I'm really not sure that I did, and I am Omid, basically. I would do exactly what Omid did. I actually think that my career as a writer has been kind of doing what Omid did in some way. I feel a deep need to master this language, and unfortunately, I wanted to be a writer.
Well, while I have you here, how much do you think as a child growing up, and where did you grow up in the States?
I grew up in Orange County.
In Orange County, how much do you think your time was spent daily thinking about your language skills and English as a second speaker? Like, how much of your mental space do you think was taken up by that?
I don't think I can put a number on it. It was like threaded into every time I opened my mouth. I have always been on like the quest to say something better, the quest to express myself more accurately. My whole life I have like not been able to really express myself beautifully in either language, except when I write, except on the page, and that's a really sacred space for me.
I'm just going to pass that question down to the Iranians. Narjan, tell us a little bit how much of like English, like what is your relationship with English? And right into like how much of your childhood was that spent like thinking about English and accents and whatnot?
I was born in Iran, moved when I was 1, moved back. We got stuck there for a number of years. I finished 3rd grade, and then we moved to Seattle when I was 8. It's funny, like, my dad didn't speak English very well, and so I felt so on the outside of everything all the time that I think I really, I glommed onto English. Like, when you say that line of, like, your head hurts, like, that was, like, me in 4th grade. Like, I stood in front of the class, and they were, like, trying to talk, like, it was, like, as if I was the biggest idiot in the world. They're like, this is Nika. And I'm like, I understand what you're saying, but I just don't have the words to respond. And within, like, 5 months, I had learned. It's funny, for me, I feel like in the times that I was learning English, I feel like my grammar isn't very good. Like, there's, like, certain insecurities that I have where I'm like, every time I'm like, my husband makes fun of me. He's like, you have the most run-on sentences of anyone. Because I'm like, I forget. Like, I just was learning English when people were learning where a comma goes and an apostrophe goes, and but like, I think that I was so my whole life on the outside that I think I embraced English much more fervently and was like, I didn't want to speak Farsi as much. Like, it was much later after like going to drama school and college and like meeting Iranian artists that I sort of reclaimed this part of myself, even though it was always like a very strong part of me. So like this idea of even in the play when I switched to Farsi, which is English, I all of a sudden feel more myself, even though it's complicated.
Yeah, totally. I'm just gonna actually ask you, Tal, that like there's a little bit of, as also born in Iran, also growing up in the States, do you remember times where you were kind of like guided, like Marjan is kind of guiding everyone to like speak in a certain way as a kid? Do you remember that or experience anything like that?
Sure. Similarly, I was born in Iran but came over as a baby to Ohio, which was very specific.
Very Iranian. Super Ohio's the Iran of
There was like a small community, and I had my grandparents and my parents, so it started similarly where we spoke Farsi in the house, and then I went to school. And there was such a desire to fit in, not only because I looked the way I did and everyone else did it, but also I think it's also my personality of insecurity, frankly, and not wanting that particular variety of spotlight on me. So I think I worked really hard to assimilate, and it's really bizarre actually to watch videos of myself from when I was a child and to hear how articulate I am as a 4-year-old. I'm speaking Farsi just like fluidly, incredibly fluidly, and to this day, my parents speak Farsi to me. I respond in English. I feel very, very anxious about speaking Farsi. I want to be better. And then also, there's another layer where I said this at some point in rehearsal, but in my most intimate relationships, which happen to not be with Persian speakers, I sometimes have these really strange flash-like moments where I think I'm speaking the wrong language. This is not, this language that I'm speaking right now to all of you is not the language that's supposed to be in my mouth. It's wrong. So it's complicated. Yeah, it's sort of like an ongoing, relations with Iran are very tricky right now, and have been my whole life, but I have some sort of fantasy of like going there and just reclaiming my speaking of the language.
Going right down the line, how much of that balance was in your life?
Oh, absolutely. So Farsi was my first language, but when I went to preschool, my parents sent me off to preschool with a little dictionary of Persian words and English words so that I could translate. But once I started going to school, my Farsi just absolutely evaporated, and so I started responding in English at home, and I could understand everything, but my speaking just started leaving me. And so to this day, up until I went to college, I had so much regret and shame when I would go to LA where all my other family was. And I grew up in Redlands, this very white suburban town where there were no Persians. But I felt so Persian. And then I would go to LA and speak with all my cousins and my family members and hear how, one, inadequate I was in my Farsi, and two, how American I sounded when I opened my mouth and how loud I felt when I spoke Farsi. So I have this flip-flop experience, and it wasn't until I went to college and took a Farsi course and learned how to read and write that I started gaining a sense of my voice in the language that is meant to be mine. And my whole family immigrated they left Iran, they fled Iran, and I've never been to Iran ever. So I do feel this attachment to this mythical place that I'm supposed to be in, and that if circumstances were different, this voice wouldn't be my voice, and being here wouldn't be my existence. So this weird kind of duality of this is me, but if circumstances were different, I'd actually be a very different person with a different tongue.
Khadija?
My experience is kind of different because I was born and raised in Iran until I was 18. My mom was basically Manajam, so my mom was an English teacher. We spoke what my mom affectionately called Finglish, which is part Farsi, part English. Even now, it's 5 words are English, 1 word is Farsi, and we laugh about it, but because that's how we've always communicated. There are many sentences in this play that resonate with me, this idea that you can know more than one language, but you can really speak one. When I left Iran, that part of me ceased to exist, and I became a New Yorker. And it wasn't until kind of this play came into my life 4-ish years ago that I started seeing parts of my childhood. The character I play reminds me very much of my grandparents, and this idea that my uncle had to kind of change his name so he could fit in America, and how they felt about it. And I kind of pride myself that I'm not Iranian, I'm not American. I have parts of that culture and things that I can only express in Farsi. And then there's a part of me which is very much a New Yorker, and I can only express myself in English. So I don't feel
I'm fucking walking here.
But I'm literally at the point that I don't say water to her, I say water.
Yeah, water.
And I embrace that. And sometimes I talk to people who are immigrants, and I'm like, you can look at it as either you're losing something or you're just becoming more. And I look at it as, I have become more than who I was before, and both of them make me who I am.
Beautiful. Excellent. Clap. You want to speak a little bit to it as well?
Yes, I am not Iranian.
Yeah!
But I'm very proud to play one.
Yeah.
I'm from Beirut, Lebanon, so I'm Arab. Yeah, I came here when I was 20, I think 19, 20, for school, and I didn't know I had a very big accent until I was placed in neutral American speech for 2 years, and was told that I wouldn't work, which was true back then. I'm not that old, not that bad, a few years ago. because, you know, like if you have an accent, you won't work, and then it's true, and then like I couldn't take dialect class until I mastered the neutral American class. It was really weird. And now, you know, and the dissonance in all this is that I went to an American school in Lebanon, and my written English and my formal English was really good, but I didn't sound American. Until now, I think I mess up idiomatic phrases. I'm a little bit self-conscious about, like, you know, colloquial American. Like I will never sound like what I considered growing up an American dude. So a lot of what Sanaz wrote in Omid's character, which I think is part of her, part of me, part of all of us, is this sense of how you navigate the world with the way you speak, and the sense of self-consciousness that happens when you open your mouth, and what is considered to belong, what is considered not to belong, what is considered to be yourself and not yourself. And so I find myself thinking in Lebanese sometimes, and so words come out weirdly in English. And then I find myself, you know, speaking to my parents with difficulty in Arabic now on the phone, because I'm phrasing my sentences in American. So it all hits home. It's all very, very personal. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I'm hearing everyone talk about is this: how much our language is our identity, like how much of like what we are, and so much of the play beautifully talks about how a level of accent is about class in a weird way, like less of a. Can we talk about that? As maybe actors, but also as children, myself included, like growing up in a place and all of a sudden having accent be, you know, I have nieces and nephews that came much later in the journey, and I remember distinctly having conversations with them when they were younger, and 13, 14, 15, talking about accents more than anything else. Can we just, because I don't know of how many people that don't have accents realize how much of your DNA is based on that. Can you just talk some experiences or anecdotes that you might want to share about that? Because I think it's really kind of, maybe I'll start with you, my love.
I want to start with that.
Okay. Yeah.
Everyone knows what I think. You know,
No one knows it.
I mean, for me, like, it's funny, like now when I speak English, I don't think of myself as having an accent, but then there's like different groups, or like, oh, I don't hear one, but when someone says I hear one, there's the thing about it is that when you hear that, what you really hear is like, you're not quite one of us. And that it's a complicated, and it's for so long, it's only, I feel like, very recent that this whole idea of like diversity being in is in.
Yeah.
So like really, mostly when you hear that, you're like, you're gonna be shut out of things. So that you don't even get to have your own feelings about it. Like, let's say if you're an actor and you have an accent, ultimately you're like, well, you're not gonna do Chekhov, you're not gonna do Williams. And so like there's so much that now, you know, some people are like, oh, we like a flavor of this, but it hasn't been that for so long. But really, I think it speaks to this thing of like, you're just not, it speaks to, I feel like, the sort of homelessness of being an immigrant. You don't really belong anywhere. And I mean, for me, New York too is like, it's the longest I've lived anywhere, and it's the most sense of home. You know, I have like my nostalgia or longing for all these other lives, but it's the only thing that's like sort of, I feel like, I've embraced that has embraced me. But I think as a kid, hearing that when someone said you do, like it was a real source of insecurity, because it's just like, well, you are, I'm already felt like always on the outside. I think like I went into acting because I was such a lonely person. You know, like it was like my, just I think in my DNA, but then that was always a double sort of remove.
Yeah, I know that. Anyone else want to speak to that at all?
I want to say something about it because we all have accents.
Yeah.
You know, even neutral American accent.
Is an accent.
It's a neutral American accent.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of what is acceptable, what has a certain value. And we live in a, admittedly and undeniably, a Eurocentric world. An Anglo-centric world that values certain accents, like Erhan's character says. They like British accents, they like French accents. So it's a matter of what we've decided has value that makes you more or makes you less. And when you come from a different place that has a lot of baggage, historically, politically, then you either embrace it, you try to hide it, you try to run away from it, and it's also the people that are around you, how they make you feel about it. Because my mom has been teaching English for 30-something years, but when she was teaching English in New Jersey, there would be someone with half her experience that would behave as superior to her. Because, as my mom says, I was a woman with a Middle Eastern name who spoke with an accent. But what she also says, which I believe our characters say one way or another, is that while we speak with an accent, we don't hear with an accent. We don't think with an accent. We don't feel with an accent. And what accent does, we get categorized. Like, do I think you're worthy of my time? Do I think you're smart? Do I think you're civilized or not? And those are judgments based on stereotypes, and you can just decide where those stereotypes come from. But we all have it, and the fashion changes. You know, French fries become freedom fries. So who knows, maybe in 10 years, like, it'll be really fashionable to have a Middle Eastern accent while you speak English, who knows?
I love the adaptability of it.
I feel like people don't know you when you have an accent. It's hard to let them know a lot about you. They just don't know you.
Can you explain a little bit more, just again, so for those that don't know what you mean, because I know exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you just get a little bit more
I
specific?
can. I mean, it's like what we just did on the
Yeah,
stage
sure.
now. It's, you know, people, I mean, when you open your mouth, like, you have to explain, like, I feel like because there is the acceptable accent, I'm reducing, obviously, and the otherness, when you're the other, it's hard to be fully, it's hard to be fully known or understood, because the minute you speak, there is a certain kind of opaqueness that happens, and behind it there's so much history and language and family and so much that you have to kind of actively explain. But actually sometimes there is no interest in that, because the shorter path has been taken, which is like, oh, you sound like that. Do you know what I mean? There is much more.
Rephrase.
Yeah.
And you may disagree with this. I'll just say it kind of crudely. I feel like for many Americans.
On the mic again, please.
Oh, right. Sorry.
I just have a suspicion that when many Americans hear accents, the speaker with the accent becomes a little less of a person.
Yeah.
I have seen it to be true. I'm sure a lot of us have.
It is true.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, there are studies of unconscious bias. Like, this is a fact. And so I just feel like it's what the new page I gave Tala today, which she memorized and did beautifully. When I speak English, I will always be stranger. A stranger or stranger, like both. And I think it really does something to a person to everyday live your life as a stranger. Something in you can wither away.
I'm going to speak from a personal level. My mom, who came to this country without having any English skills, to be honest with you, zero. And the amount of times, I'm going to cry, the amount of times I could hear my mom saying to people, "I'm not stupid," is really a heartbreaking feeling, because obviously my mom's not fucking stupid. But it does take away from that. So I think one of the things that I think that your character is so desperately trying to express is that, yeah, but they will judge you because of the way that you speak. And how much, for my mom and myself, you know, I was in ESL classes for 4 years, and I was more interested in sounding American than actually reading. You know what I mean? So I have like a hard time reading, but I can speak English well. You know what I mean? Like, so like all these choices are being made. So I really, anyway, I don't want to speak about myself, but I do feel that that is very true what you said, and I feel that it defines my mother in a way that is now imprinted in her life forever. Forever.
And it is a huge thing to grieve. It is a huge thing to grieve.
And it's exhausting too. Like I think it's you're kind of screwed either way. Like my parents are different in this way, where my dad has a very thick accent. He's a very funny guy in Farsi, in Persian, and doesn't quite work in English. It's like literal jokes that don't work in translation. My mom has had to do a lot more public speaking in her life, and I actually thought, I thought she like didn't have an accent, and at some point my friends were like, she has an accent. But she's worked so hard on it. And to this day, I see her sometimes like kind of like speaking, like saying the words to herself. And it's like both are exhausting. Like my dad is not seen in the same way that as his like pertinent, his full personhood. My mom is working forever to like be better and like be more accepted. And the other thing I want to say, which I think your play is also touches on, but I felt very much, even though I'm not technically second generation, I grew up in this country. When in this country, and I know I grew up in Ohio, but when in this country, people cannot say your name, it is really hard. And when people on a page, it's like I've watched brains like jumble and seeing my name, which I think is a very simple name, Tala. It's hard not to internalize that.
Yes.
Like, and if that's like the most basic, that's our name, then how like where do you go from there in terms of like accent and identification with your culture? It's and some of that is changing, but in a lot of places.
How much of those decisions were made as for the ones that came here at a young age? How much of those decisions were made as a child? I mean, again, not to speak, but I remember I was like 7 in the bathroom stall at school, trying to sample what was the easiest way that people could say my name.
Yeah.
Like literally a 7-year-old decided that Arian was the easiest way. That's not true. Arian is my name, but no way that I think that anyone. So how many of those decisions are now inside of your life today?
How many times have I said Tala like Tallahassee?
Yeah.
It still doesn't work.
Yeah.
Still doesn't work. I get Tara.
Starbucks name.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to speak to that at all?
I mean, it's, I feel like if I say my name correctly, people will not say my name.
Yes.
Oh,
So, I mean, and I have a lot of, I have Iranian friends who call me Margie. My whole life, they're even my cousins, Margie, which is, in a way, some of my close friends too, because, even going into auditions or going into rooms where I'm meeting people, this is such and such director. If I say my name correctly, they're so uncomfortable with the fact that they know they're going to say it wrong, they won't say it.
Yeah.
So I have the choice of mispronouncing my name and having people know me, or just saying it correctly and have no one talk to me. I don't know. That's where I live.
Knud, you have a little bit of that too. You do have a little bit of that.
Yeah, well, I changed my name because my real name is Jan Eric from France when I grew up.
I think you told me that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell us a little. And then when did you change it?
College.
And why did you change it?
Knud is a family name. Knud Knudsen is my great-grandfather, and I just identified with him. He was the artist in the family. And when I sort of shifted gears and moved away from my family and came out, I just wanted a reset.
What was your name?
Jan Eric. Hyphenated.
Jan Eric.
Hey, Frank.
Jan.
I say this correctly.
When I was Jan in high school.
Jan Eric.
Jan Eric.
Jan Eric.
I'm going to, because I know that I'm supposed to check time, but I haven't been. Does anyone have any questions for this unbelievable cast and crew? Oh, I love the hands. We're going to go with right here, and then we'll go right there. Nice and loud if you can.
Yes.
I'll repeat.
Can you give us an idea of the Farsi conversation between Marjan and
The question is, at the end, when it was speaking in Farsi,
I know we're supposed to imagine it ourselves.
they're talking about the Cubs and Mets game. But does anyone want to speak to that at all?
I feel like that's
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I
playwright
think
stuff.
you guys are okay. Let's make a loud noise.
No.
Give her this to the mic.
Apologize too many times. What do they say? They say,
Oh, yes. We'll say it. Okay, if you're okay with us saying it, we'll say it.
Prefer it, yeah.
Okay, great. You first say.
She says, what do you hear? And I say, I hear it too, but I don't know.
BFL doesn't really quite translate, but it's like, don't worry about it. Yeah.
And I say, no, that is my answer. And I go, okay. And then I say, your own accent with time may change.
And I go, also, it might not.
And then I said, and one day on the phone you might realize that you sound like a foreigner. That day may come too.
And then I say, thank you, Marjan. Good day. Goodbye.
And I say, don't be a stranger.
I say, God willing.
Wow, I wish I'd known that.
Total reflection tomorrow.
I'm going to just so I can get a couple questions in. Yes, sir.
It's more about the creative process. So I saw this play, thought it was incredible, and then I hear that the author wants to add some line, something like, what do you try to make it? How do you want to change this? I mean, it's like, why change anything?
Okay, you say that though, and I changed it today.
Yeah, it's crap, yes.
Sucks for Sunday's audience. Yeah, do
Do
this.
this so no one yells at me.
It's amazing being back in theater. The terrible and amazing thing about theater is it's never finished. For me, this is awful. For me, this is wrenching. But we learn a lot from you guys every night. And I think that's my job, is to try to get the thing while honoring that it should be flawed in some way. I don't know, I kind of respond to messy, unfinished work too. Since it's me, I'm like, not too messy. But yeah.
Any other questions here? I'm going to go right there. Nice and loud, and I'll repeat.
Absolutely. Thank you. Welcome to my world. My family has been here 90 years, and we are still seen as immigrants. We're not immigrants, we're migrants, because we come from Puerto Rico. And it's like really interesting for me to understand your entire mashugga, because it is, I understand, and I thank you, and I am so proud that I came tonight. I almost didn't, but it was too cold. Don't change a word for me. Keep it as is.
Thank you.
I'm looking to make sure what my gauge of time is.
You're good. We have to do virtual questions as well. Can I ask a question for our virtual?
Virtual, wow, this is
What a time.
This is like 2022.
So awesome. A question from Jade in our virtual audience. How has working on this play changed you? Are there parts of the characters, lines of dialogue that you feel have changed the way you approach any parts of your life?
Their answer to me like, I'm never working with someone again.
I don't know. I don't think playing. I think every time you do something, you kind of discover more about yourself, or you dig into a part of yourself. And if that is a change, then that is it. But I feel like you kind of end up finding some pain or joy that you didn't know you had. So I guess that's how I see it. I don't know.
Remember at our callback for Goli, you said, so a lot of girls have been doing it this way, just bring a little bit more of yourself to it. And I originally, Goli was a girl who would get on stage and she was a little bit scared and a little bit fearful. And then as we worked on melding more of who I am and Goli together, I realized that when somebody is aiming for something or wanting something, it doesn't have to come across as fear. It can come across as am I getting it? Am I getting it? Constantly asking, reassurance. And that is a very me thing to do. And so, in a lot of ways, Knud and Goli helped me have self-awareness, deeper self-awareness for the way I relate to other people and how I am in process, even in this rehearsal, trying to ask questions about Goli, kind of those two worlds. The offstage and onstage life parallels meld quite seamlessly, actually.
I think for me, playing my character, it's my way of relating to the family I came from. I feel like they've been with me through this process. I can understand the things that they went through, the things they felt, feeling less than, and I have more compassion for that because now I've had to find my way through that. Also, I want somebody to dress me all the time from now on because the byproduct is considerably nicer than what I'm doing.
I'm just going to ask a few more questions from the audience here. I'm going to have in the second row here. Yeah. Nice and loud.
Okay. This is a question for Sanaz. I was curious what your process was in figuring out how to make the distinction between English and Farsi. Did you think about making the play in Farsi originally, like in actual English, or yeah?
I have been thinking about what it means to put an accent on stage for a long time, given that there's a lot of actors don't like doing it. And why not? Because I think accents are laughed at and it feels really tricky. And I also have always thought about how I was going to write like my family drama, like what I was going to add to the American canon. And in my house, we were bilingual. And I had always thought, like, I need to find a way to tell my story on stage, honoring the Farsi, without shutting off the audience from the inner lives of my characters. And so I felt like this was the only way we could ever do this play. It could never, ever, ever be an actual bilingual play. Because for you to feel for them, like, they have to have access to that language. And I feel differently now actually about like the family drama. It's gonna be bilingual. Like it's okay, and I think it's so beautiful to have other languages on stage. And this play is about like the struggle, and we could never have that without you guys knowing exactly down to the T how hard it is for them. So it was the only way to do it.
And thank you for saying my name correctly.
Do we have a question? I can't tell if that's a question in the corner. Yeah?
Two questions.
Okay, now.
For the playwright, all your students' names are strongly inspirational names, and the teacher's a neutral name. Was that intentional?
Oh, why is
Her name Madra?
No. All the students' names, Roya, Elham, right now, Omi, are very hopeful, positive names.
Yeah.
And the teachers is neutral. Did you do that intentionally?
Oh no, I just love those names.
And for the director, Mr. Adams, what's your background? How did you, obviously the best play of the year, and obviously language works as a vehicle for showing people who are struggling between two different cultures also. What's your background? How did you relate to that?
Sure. Yeah, I think more coincidentally, the way, on a personal note, the fact that my family, I was born in the States, but my mother was born in Denmark, had a sort of European spotty growing up, as did my family. I went to France for basically a kindergarten, pre-K, and then back to America, and then to England, and then to France again, and then to Scotland, and then back to the States. And yeah, I think this wasn't my story, but I think a lot of the directors that I know, like, who are like army brats, that constant feeling of being on the outside, getting acquainted into new environments very quickly. I think sometimes the spectator sees more of the game. So for me, accents, I understand. I was a very fast assimilator. That was my sort of survival tactic. 2 months after moving to England, I had an English accent. Scottish accent, cutest Scottish accent you've ever heard. France was harder. I remember a teacher screaming at me after like 4 months to be like, "You stupid baby." Why? I don't understand. Which was hard. But bilingual, and she's actually a teacher of English as a foreign language, second language. So yeah, but you know, that just happens to be my story, but more pertinently, I think that there is universal relatability in this hyper-specific, and that's what Sanaz, her writing teaches us, is that, yeah, trying to, as she says, remove the distance or any filter from understanding the full prismatic humanity of these people in their own country. And it's a beautiful thing. And yeah, and also just like, yeah, to answer the previous question about like what this process might have changed for us or taught us, I think really Sanaz led a conversation about authenticity and accuracy in creating a world, which is something that I strive to do always, but also led by her sort of a charge, a prompt to be aesthetically ambitious and creative, and for the framing of the event to feel as freeing and audacious as any theater venture. So again, prompted by her and the beautiful design team we had, sort of allowing everyone to bring their full skills and themselves to the table and not be so polite in their creativity that they're missed opportunity. And that's why she's a really good leader as well as a writer.
Well, if that's not a great way to end my